So let's go through some brief history here before we get started. So once upon a time within our writer, the only way to greet and write up a customer would be from this window right here. Now, one of the big problems with just greeting and writing up a customer from this window here is that means you were glued to your counter in your office or wherever the customer would walk up to. Sometimes it could even be out in the shop. And in the modern world, sometimes that is not quite as personable, or sometimes you don't get to see all the details on a vehicle when you don't get a chance to walk out there with the customer. So with Smart Status DVI, what it allows us to do is to be able to utilize our tablet. What I typically recommend anybody doing is greet your customers in the parking lot. And this is where our journey begins on how to utilize Smart Status DVI from a service writer perspective. Now you can see in my window here, I have a couple of different icons. I'm logged in as my service writer, Rick. And I have work in progress, estimates, new RO, new estimate, and shop pulse. Obviously, when I'm greeting my customer, I have two options. I can either A, write up a new estimate, which is pretty common in most shops, or I can start off with a new RO. One thing to keep in mind, if you do have our Smart Status, it may be behooving to start your repair orders up as a RO. Now, the reason why I suggest this is simply because in our writer, in order to be able to send the text messages and communicate the statuses of vehicles with our customers, you will need a repair order. It will not function from the estimates window. So for today's example, let's go ahead and start our repair order from a new RO. Imagine, if you will, we're car side with our customer, and I'm just going to grab this customer's last name. Customer's last name is Swanson. Once again, it's going to search our writer for that customer to see if they've ever been here before, and doesn't look like the customer's ever been here before. So we'll go ahead and add a first name. Just like normal, we'll go ahead and add an address. But what I love about using the tablet is I could easily opt to do voice dictation. And make sure you hit enter on any zip code. As you can see, it's going to give me an option based upon that zip code. We'll go ahead and choose Brooksville, and then we can go ahead and enter a phone number. Now, the phone number is incredibly important because what we want to do is we want to ask the customer, is this your cell phone? Because we're going to be sending them text messages about the status of their vehicle. So whatever number I'm going to enter in this window here will be the number in which I am going to receive text on. So in this case, I'm going to enter my phone number and just validate that that's correct with the customer. And then the next thing we want to do is go ahead and make sure we grab the customer an email. So in this case, let's go ahead and grab training@rwriter.com. Now at this point, the next option we need to do is go ahead and click save on this window here. So from here, it's going to ask us, well, what type of vehicle are we dealing with? Now we have a couple of different ways in which we can gather this information. Way number one, we can scan the VIN number. And if we had a VIN number, all we have to do is open the door placard on the inside of the vehicle and scan that VIN number. Character identification only requires 17 digits to decipher a VIN number. It works pretty well. But most commonly, when we're walking up behind a vehicle or we're talking with the customer, we're outside of the vehicle and we're going to see the license plate first. So if we have a license plate, we can simply enter it in here. So I'll go ahead and hit search. Okay, so it did go ahead and pull up that vehicle. It's a 2017 Chevy Cruze. Just like before, we'll go ahead and enter the mileage. The nice thing about being car side with the customer is we can validate that the mileage is correct. Another thing that we can do car side with the customer is verify that there's no dash lights on. And if there are any dash lights, we can go ahead and take photos of those dash lights. So let's go ahead and put the mileage in. I think we have 40,000 on this vehicle, and then we can hit save. Now it's going to ask us to validate that mileage one more time, and that is correct. And we'll say create new RO. So now we have an RO created. And up at the top, you'll notice there's a set of icons, and one of those icons do have a little notification. It's a little 1 symbol. We're going to get to that in just a moment. But the very first thing that we need to be documenting with the customer is their service requests. So what is a service request? Well, it could be anything that the customer is telling us about the vehicle. In this case, Steve is saying that the brakes are making noise. So how do we go ahead and document that? Well, way number one is we can go ahead and just simply type that in here. Way number 2 is to let Steve tell us what's wrong with it and then just repeat back. So Steve told me that the brakes are making a grind-in sound. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to enable voice dictation. The brakes are making a grind-in sound. And it's just like that. Super easy. We didn't have to type anything. We can have a conversation and repeat back what the customer has stated is wrong with their vehicle. And then you just want to go ahead and hit save once you've entered that information in there. Moving over to the services tab, you'll notice that I have a free courtesy check. Now, by default, I always set up a courtesy check to be added on the ticket automatically. I want every car that comes through the door in my store to have a courtesy check. And because of that, I went ahead and added that here. One other thing that I can do from this window is I can assign this to a technician. So here's a list of my technicians. I'm going to assign Bart Smith and I'll hit save. I can also alternatively add some comments into this window here for Bart, like maybe the customer got their windows tinted. I will say don't roll down window. So now we have some notes in there for him so he knows what's happening when he gets into that vehicle. Over on the far right here, we have the checklist window. Now the checklist window, most would think, well, wait a second, this is only for a technician. They're the only ones that are going to be going through doing these checklists. But you can program and customize your checklist to do multiple things. And one of the things you can do is maybe put a walk around item on this checklist so you as the service writer can do a brief walk around and document any known damage on the vehicle with the customer that's there. The other nice thing is all of these icons to the far right are camera icons in which you can take photos and document the items on the vehicle. And it's just an easy way to prevent anything from happening later on when that customer comes back to pick up the vehicle. You're both on the same page at that point. Clicking off to the back side, we're now going to go walk to the shop. But before we get into the shop, we can also look at any of the history that may be on this vehicle as well, such as declined services or recommended services, so we can have an understanding of if there was anything we ever did on this vehicle. A nice thing that I always recommend for people to do is check out that Carfax service history to see if brakes were ever repaired on this vehicle at any one point. And it doesn't look like brakes were done based upon what I'm seeing here, but always check your history as well just to verify that you didn't just do brakes on the customer's vehicle. Now we're heading back into the office, and this is where stage 2 of this comes into play. So stage 2 comes from our writer's Smart Status, and this is where we're going to need to have a conversation with our customer. So you can see here's our Smart Status window here, and I'm going to go ahead and zoom out. So from this window here, I can see here's Steve Swanson's vehicle that Rick wrote up. And if I wanted to look at this from just the tickets that Rick wrote up, all I have to do is toggle this over to Rick's thermal. And there we go. We have just 2 tickets that Rick has written up. Now, what I need to do is have a conversation with Steve and say, hey, Steve, we have the ability to send you a text message to communicate the status of your vehicle. Now, these messages will stop as soon as your repair order is finalized. Is that okay with you? Now, if Steve agrees to all that, I'm going to say to him, I'm going to go ahead and send you an authorization text. You're going to need to reply with okay. So from here, this window, we need to click on this text message icon and click allow texting. We also want to make sure that we have a good phone number. Now you may be saying to yourself, well, I entered a phone number in on the Smart Status outside. How come it's not carrying over? Well, in the configurations of Smart Status, we have it set up to our cell phone field. Now field number 1 in the RWriter Smart Status application defaults to the home field. So you will need to ask the customer one more time for their mobile device or directly pull it over from RWriter. In this case, maybe the customer says, you know, I don't know if that's going to be a good contact number that I recently gave you. So maybe they say, well, I want to give you a different phone number to utilize. So in that instance, we can go ahead and enter that phone number now. And in this case, it was a different number entirely. So let's go ahead and enter that. So now we have a good phone number for the customer in play, and you'll notice that that icon has gone green. So what does that green mean? Well, it's ready to be opted into texting. And you can see we have a series of bars here in which we can drag and drop that icon. For today, what I'll do is I'm just going to grab Steve's RO and drag and drop to the opt into texting field. And you can see it turns a nice bright pink. and I received a message on my phone. Now what Steve has to do, he has to respond with okay, in which he should have just did that. Let me go ahead and refresh the checklist here, and we'll wait for that RO to update. Sometimes it can take a little bit, but you can see that you can opt out of this message by text and stop, and these messages will automatically stop when your repair order is finalized. Now, transversely, if I log into Bart on the tablet here, Bart will also receive a message from us as well. So part of being a good service writer is the fact that you need to be communicating the statuses of the vehicles to the technicians. So now watch what we'll do here. We'll go ahead and drag this over to here, and we should get a pop-up notification here in just a moment to the technician indicating that he has a new repair order assigned. Now, if we don't get that, we can also assign Bart Smith from here as well, in which he will get a message here shortly. Dragging and dropping will send more messages over to the customer as well. So part of communicating with the customer is sending these messages. And you can see it says that we've completed the vehicle inspection. It's the service writer's responsibility to drag and drop the vehicle to the different steps within Smart Status. None of this happens automatically, and because it doesn't happen automatically, you do have to manage it. And it's because of this I recommend keeping this window open on a second monitor, if at all applicable. If you can't do that, that's okay. Just keeping it open to a split screen will work equally as well, but it's nice to keep this open and manage it constantly as vehicles change statuses. Now, as Bart goes through and does the inspection, we can communicate with the customer what that checklist actually looks like. So for instance, if we go into the checklist section here, we can edit this checklist ourselves if we didn't like something that the technician had put into play. So for instance, maybe he put the battery was okay, but it's really not. We can go ahead and say needs attention immediately, or we can go through and just make some various changes along with add some notes off to the far right hand side here, in which they'll show up like this. You have options up here at the top. One of the options is that you can send a text message with the customer's courtesy inspection directly to them, along with being able to email the customer their checklist as well. Now, one thing to remember, you do need to have a valid email on file with the customer in order for them to receive that message. I always ask them what they prefer. Do they prefer a text message or do they prefer an email? If they've opted into the text message and platform, it's probably safe to say it's easier to go with a text message, so that way we're not bombarding them on all fronts. As the vehicles go through, we also have the checklist dashboard, which is analytics for a service writer. And you can see I don't have any analytics in here right now, but if I quickly change the date of this, so we'll go ahead and change it to 2019 just to give you an idea of what this looks like. This lets you know how many repair orders have had checklists on there, how many repair orders actually completed courtesy checks. And you can see Bart has a completion ratio of 50%. So these are analytics that a service writer can use efficiently to determine, well, are the technicians actually completing their checklist? And then also, what are they actually recommending as these checklists go through? Are they just Christmas treeing it, or are they actually taking the time to inspect each individual vehicle? So I try to look at the analytics on this at least once a day. I'll take a glance through this. You can also default through this and you can see the differences between the checklists. So if you want to see just inspections, you can go ahead and refresh that, and we didn't have any of that. And let's take a look at the courtesy check. So you can sort it by the type of inspection that you are doing. And in this case, we only had 2 that have happened right now. Moving back over to the Smart Status tab, when this vehicle gets all the way done and it gets to the approved state, you'll see now he's got an approval, and that happened to pop up on the tablet here. Bart has a notification on his tablet that the repair order has been approved, and he can go ahead and begin the work on it. As a service writer, you have to communicate the statuses of the vehicles and the information to your technicians so they can keep the flow moving. You ultimately control the shop flow. And again, as we get to the very end of everything, we will mark it down as finished, in which the customer will get one more message letting them know that the vehicle is ready to be picked up. Always a good recommendation that if you don't get a message back from the customer, try to give them a courtesy call. Don't just rely on the fact that they are going to see these messages. Still try to get them on the phone if you need to. If they are being incredibly responsive via text, that should be okay. But for the most part, I still try to communicate with them on the phone. This is just a nicety, and some customers you will find will utilize this more so than picking up the phone because that's much more convenient to do so. But that's going to round out to the end of the use cases for our writer Smart Status from a service writer perspective.